Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Boulevard Cinematic Universe. Now, I wanted to just kind of go over the meta and give my thoughts on it more or less, which is actually going to be really easy because if we just go down the list of decks looking at the matter, this is listed by play rate over the last 2 days. We have Seraphine, Vayne, 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 Seraphine, Anijin, Seraphine, Vayne, Akshan, Vayne, Vayne, Swain, which sounds like Vayne. But essentially, what I've started to notice while going through this meta is that there's like 3 champions that exist in the game, and that is Vayne, Seraphine, and Akshan. And I'm actually a little surprised not to see another Akshan deck up here. Very surprised that Akshan Varus is the only one that's up here and just barely scraping above a 50% win rate. I think a lot of people know that like Akshan Demacia, Lee Sin, Akshan, still very powerful decks. And I just guess I'm going to use this as a platform to talk about Seraphine and Vayne as a whole because they seem to be completely taking over the meta. Now, I don't really have a whole lot of preference when it comes to what kind of deck you put them in. Speaking on these top 2 here, not really a fan of the Noxus Ezreal Seraphine. What I kind of feel like this deck does is it gasses out like you're kind of used to Noxus Ezreal doing and then just refuels with the Seraphine. That's cool and all. I prefer the Bilgewater variant that I highlighted in gameplay yesterday that Drissoth built, the one that plays this Fleet Admiral Shelly. I feel like it doesn't run out of resources as fast. I feel like it doesn't have any weak points if it doesn't hit the Seraphine and has other avenues to victory. Ezreal Seraphine kind of feels like it needs both champions in order to pull through, which is just not a deck for me. I'm not really a big fan of Seraphine, if I'm being honest. A lot of frustrating play patterns. The fact that she is statted the same as Vigar is kind of wild to me. Even Quietus has proven to be not as effective in killing her as you'd like because sometimes she just randomly generates like a Brother's Bond or some other attack buff spell. Really hate this card. Really hoping that we see some nerfs to it. I think the actual specific point that I want nerfed is like I think this should be statted like a 2-drop that does what it does. I understand that like the champion to follower gap is what you expect out of Legends of Runeterra. It's the deck building thing. It's what's exciting about the game. It's not a direction that I'm in love with, but it's one that I've come to accept. But the fact that like you have 2 mana cards that exist and like one of them is a vanilla 1/4 that you actually took away its elite tags so that it was no longer like in a pool of randomly generated elites. And then you look at Seraphine and everything that she does. That's way too big a gap in my opinion. Vayne, probably better than Seraphine long term. Obviously, like there's a lot more Vayne decks up here than there are Seraphine decks. They're a little bit more straightforward. You know, maybe they're not as exciting or flashy, but Vayne is Midas. Everything she's touching right now is turning into gold. We've got a Runeterra champion, a different Runeterra champion. We've got Targon. We've got Shadow Isle. We've got Ionia. We've got Noxus. And then a deck that I'm actually going to play as soon as I finish recording this video for a video later is if we actually sort by win rate, we get this, where is it? Fiora Vayne, Piltover, and Zon. And like, this deck's kind of weird, which is expected because when you look at the top pile, it's like you get Teal Red, you get Ruben Zoo, and you get 4LW. Like, every deck builder is on this right now. So I'm gonna build this for tomorrow, but it really is just like, if you're playing in a tournament setting, it feels like you probably should just have a Seraphine deck, a Vayne deck, and an Akshan deck. And then if you want to not run that lineup, you should be looking to counter one of those 3 decks. I think that you could look to pick on the Seraphine decks more wholly than you could pick on the Vayne deck, because I think the Vayne decks have a lot more variance amongst the flavor of them. Like Rumble Vayne is not really going to be playing that similarly to like Pantheon Vayne, but like Ezreal Seraphine, not too far off from like Shadow Isle Seraphine and Seraphine Victor. You know, they're still looking to control the board, get the Seraphine down, do all this crazy level up stuff. Yeah, the win condition now is like, instead of snowballing a Victor from the early game, I want to like late game an Ezreal. But for the most part, what is disappointing to me about the current metagame is just like the repeat of champions and the similarities of strategy across the board. Like, you have to get down to like the 11th deck before you get into, oh, it's just TF Swain and then like MF Swain. Like, this is even basically the same deck. And then we're back at Seraphine, and then it's like Lurk, and then there's just not as much diversity. It's really unhealthy. Worlds patch is still 3.5 weeks away. I'm definitely not going to be playing as much going into the Worlds patch as I was sort of last season. Last season I was having a lot of fun. This season I am not having a lot of fun. I'm having an awful time this season. So again, I did want to just like go over the meta, give you an idea of what everything is looking like right now that the opening weekend is over, especially because I did seem so lost going into the tournament weekend. I'm a lot I'm on solid ground now, and I don't love it, but that is where I have landed. So Seraphine, Vayne, Akshan, that's your lineup. I don't really care what flavors you go for. That's where the sort of diversification gets to come in. But I don't want to just sort of sit here for 10 minutes and give you my thoughts on like every individual Vayne list or like every individual Seraphine list. So gonna keep this one kind of short, I guess, and be like, well, that's because that's what the meta is. It's just Seraphine, Vayne, Akshan, and not even a lot of Akshan. A lot of Vayne. A lot of Vayne. So looking forward to that Worlds patch.